Okay, I want to talk to you today about office hours. Before I do, I just have a quick question. Who in this room holds dedicated live office hours? Okay, raise your hands good and high. Of those, who gets students attending regularly? Okay, saw a couple of hands going on. Thanks, that's what I want to know. Can I have that first slide? Oh, yes, this is top secret. Sorry, this is live office hours, your secret weapon. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience with office hours and why I feel like this is sort of an untapped resource. But first, can we hit the first slide? Does this describe anybody's office hours experience? We have to start with cat names, right? Because they're funny. Office hours sort of has like the reputation of being, you know, dead time. Actually, go to the next one. The next one's funny too. This is, I think, how my students sometimes feel about office hours. And I think, or the last one, which is probably, yeah, that's probably the most common, right? That describe your experience. You have your office hours and you sit there and you're like, well, I guess this is a good time to get some grading done because, right, nobody shows that. My experience with office hours as a brand new instructor, we'll just sit here on the slide for a little bit. As a brand new instructor years ago was kind of different. I had come from a traditional classroom background. I taught at BYU for a couple of years, and I loved interacting with my students in the classroom, outside the classroom. It was sort of, it was really all I knew how to do. So online instruction kind of baffled me, I'll be honest. I was excited to teach here, but I had no idea what I was doing. And office hours was sort of my lifeline. I figured this is the only thing I can think of to make connections with students in the way that I was accustomed to making connections with students. So my very first semester of teaching, I decided I was going to hold office hours. I was going to, I don't know, teach a little lesson or something and see what happened, see if I could get to know my students better. And in that first semester, with a mix of a little bit of beginner's luck and a whole lot of ignorance, I actually had a fantastically successful office hours experience. On good weeks, I would have about 12 students attend. On bad weeks, I would have maybe 6 or 8 students attend all at the same time. I didn't know that this was unusual, that it was, you know, really good, but it was fun. What then happened is what inevitably happens. I got busy. I picked up another course. I started working as a TGL. I didn't have time for office hours like I had, you know, that first semester. And I dropped it. It was one of the first things to go when things got a little bit hairier. After, you know, over the course of a few semesters, I started to feel like something was missing. I just wasn't connecting with my students in the way that I had been previously, and I wasn't quite sure what was wrong. Well, one of the things that I decided to do just really in this last semester, you're getting here kind of the result of an experiment. I decided to resurrect my old office hours, but with a more evaluative lens. I wanted to see not just if I could do it again, if it would work again, but what worked well, why it worked well, and what I could do to improve it. So this presentation really is a result of my own sort of self-evaluation, my research, between my own experience talking to other instructors and doing a bit of reading and research to figure out how office hours can be more useful, not just for us, obviously, but for our students, okay? All right. I'm going to divide this up kind of into 3 sections. I want to talk about the why of office hours, and that's sort of a little quick, you know, lit review. I want to talk about the what, how to define office hours, or maybe how to change our definition of office hours so that it's more useful for us. And then we'll get into the fun part, which is where I hope I'll have you interact a little bit more, talk about nuts and bolts, what we can do to conduct effective office hours. I had a handout that I forgot to print out. I'm really sorry about that. It was basically my bibliography. It was the scholars, the studies, the researchers and organizations that I use to put a lot of this information together. If you want that, email me and I will send it to you. If not, you don't have to worry about it. So I am, what I looked at was kind of a narrow space in this discourse of online instruction and pedagogy, right? That talks very specifically about synchronous and asynchronous experiences, okay? Or elements, I guess you could say, to a class. What we do is very heavily asynchronous, right? Our discussion boards, grading, quizzes, things like that, which is okay. It's not about which is better between synchronous and asynchronous. It's about the strengths or the benefits and the limitations of each, okay? And according to these researchers that I worked with, oh, sorry, can you click? One more time. That's what we want. According to these researchers, the benefits of synchronous experiences come down to two big things. One of them I'm really excited because President Gilbert talked quite a bit about today, and I'm actually going to steal a little of what he said. So the first benefit is the one that we would think of pretty naturally, and that is community, right? The dropout rates, anybody know anything about dropout rates for online education programs?
Well, I know from Western Governors, which is where I got my master's, it's 62%.
Oh,
no,
ouch.
Sorry, 38%.
Oh,
Unfinished.
38% finish?
No.
Oh, don't finish. Gotcha.
And the only reason I know that number is because when I signed up for that, FAFSA sent me, do you really want to go there?
That sounds about right. The national average that I looked at said something between 70 and 75% finish, yeah. Right? Which is 10 to 20% lower than traditional classroom programs. So it's a problem, and it's a problem that researchers are looking into. Studies suggest a really strong correlation between the students' perception of a sense of community and their completion rates. So they feel like they're part of a group, that there are other students experiencing this with them, that their instructor is aware of them, that sort of thing, that they have a higher chance of actually finishing. In fact, studies also suggest correlation between that feeling, that perception of a community, and achieved learning outcomes. So it's not just that they'll stay in their program and finish, it's that they'll do a better job in their program, right? So it's become, excuse me, it's kind of a given actually from the beginning of this research in online instruction to about now that that community enhances learning. Okay, we know that I'm a pathway instructor, for example. Are there any other pathway instructors in here? Good, lots of you. We know this because what do our students do every week? They gather, right? They go to a gathering. They actually participate in a physical community, and that's such a crucial part of Pathway. We're introducing them into education generally, and probably online education, but for starters, as an introduction to this experience, they have to feel like they're part of a group. I was really interested to hear President Gilbert say that they're talking about expanding that into all the other online programs. That's really exciting, and from my perspective, according to what I've been studying here, key. It's crucial that students feel like they're part of that. In fact, I took a picture of the quotation from President Eyring that President Gilbert used. It would be easy to look for ways to help learners learn alone using the wonders of technology. And there's a lot out there, right? There's a lot of tech that we could sort of shuffle up, yeah, and say independent study, go for it. But the same technology could give learners the experience of helping others they love to learn with them. The climbs to the places God would have us go are never for us alone. I love that idea. There's a spiritual component to this idea of community. Our secular researchers have tapped into it, but we know that there is something eternal about doing this together. Okay, so what does this have to do with synchronous experiences like office hours? It solves the problem of isolation. This is a quotation from one of the articles that I've been looking at. Isolation can be overcome by more continued contact, particularly synchronously, and becoming aware of themselves as a community rather than isolated individuals communicating with the computer. One of the responses that they get from students over and over who are participating in these online programs is that because these interactions are so heavily mediated, they lose facial expressions, they lose body language, they lose the tone of voice. They feel like they're interacting not with an instructor, but with the computer, okay? Which is not fulfilling in the same ways. What are the, so office hours, for example, is a way to give our students the interaction with a human that we're talking about. What are the elements of this community that scholars are talking about? They talk about it in several different terms. One scholar says it needs to be these three things. Content-related communication, so we're actually talking about the content of our courses. Task planning, talking about assignments and due dates and things like that. And social interaction. Is that a little bit important? It's huge. It's hugely important. Another scholar gives another list of three. Listen to this. We must, as online instructors, be present or seen. He says we actually have to be seen. Our interactions need to be immediate, and there needs to be a social component. Do you see that social comes up over and over? Here's a note on social interaction. What they found is that in asynchronous interactions online in online education, 90% of those interactions tend to be course related. 90%. In synchronous experiences, 60% of the interaction is course related. What does that mean? You could say yes, that they're off task, but we could also say, how many of you have taught in a traditional classroom? Sorry, you had your hand raised.
Oh, I was just saying, it might mean that in a real classroom, we start getting into application. Like, let's hear stories, let's hear examples of how you're doing that, and then people have a chance to share. They learn about each other, and they learn about how to apply what the content is.
Yes, very good. So application makes a difference, yeah.
Well, and in a regular classroom, you're also building relationships one-on-one, personally, right there, and as a community with the whole class at the same time. So it seems to me that when you translate that over into the online, you can start to build the relationships, and when you build the relationships, that leads to better information for me for the content.
What happens in a traditional classroom in the 2 minutes before the class starts and in about the 10 minutes after the class starts? Somebody, yeah, I see this. People going like this. That's what we do, right? Naturally. We don't have to build it into our course. It happens naturally. And we may think of it as being off task, but we also know that this is hugely important time. It's hugely important time. I remember trying to come up with like reasons to stick around and talk to my professors just because I wanted to get to know them better. It had a huge impact on my learning experience because I knew that they cared about me, and I wanted that relationship. I wanted to feel that kind of community. So 90% versus 60% means that when we're interacting almost exclusively asynchronously, we're not getting the opportunity to talk to our students in a social forum, okay? And that's really, and we try, right? We've got these Q&A boards associated with our notes from instructor, or maybe we've got like a separate little spiritual thought board, and we try to generate that. Is that super easy? Like, do they love it and jump on it and talk all the time? Okay, just making sure it wasn't just my students. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to get natural conversations going in an asynchronous format, okay? All right, I want to talk about the second benefit. So community is the first one. Can you hit the slide? The second one is a little less intuitive, at least for me. This was news, okay? The second one has to do with motivation. It says here, synchronous communication increases psychological arousal, okay? That's, you know, fancy academic speak. But what it's talking about is the ability to, I gotta get this right. When we're speaking naturally, one-on-one, we like to keep the conversation going, right? We're leery of that dead space in the conversation. And to do that, we read faces, we read body language. We know that our reactions are being gauged because we're doing the same thing, right? We're looking to see how what we say affects the person across from us. When we communicate synchronously, specifically when we can see the other person, we are more psychologically aroused. Another way we could say that is engaged. We're more engaged, okay? So students who have a chance to interact with other students and their instructor in real time with some visuals are more motivated to participate, to come prepared, right? Because they see and know that they're getting real-time responses, and more motivated to respond, okay? So synchronous communication increases student engagement. That's something, I'm a TGL, and this is something that comes up almost every semester. An instructor asks, how can I get my students more engaged? How can I help engage them better? This is one of the principles, okay? All right, let's go on to the second. You can flip the slide. Let's go on to the what of office hours. So that's the why. You see why it's important. At the end, I'm actually going to read you a couple of student evaluations of instructors who do these, and you'll see even more why. Okay, so what are office hours? Traditionally, what are office hours? Go ahead, you get to answer. Yeah?
Professor's in his office with the door open, and anybody can walk in and say anything you want.
That's right. Hit the slide. Go ahead. What we think of as office hours is just sort of an open house, right? I'll be in my office from this time to this time. The door's open. Come on in, never. Okay? There's a problem with this model, and even in a traditional classroom sense, there's a problem with this model. It doesn't always work the way that we want it to. It implies that, well, first of all, we're waiting, right? It depends on the student's initiative. It depends on the student's convenience. It's optional, and it's passive, right? So let's think about changing what we think of as office hours. Can you hit it again? Okay, good. Do the names Payloff and Pratt ring a bell? They get quoted in the instructor handbook a little bit. One of the things that they point out in another article that they write is that online faculty are particularly responsible to create community in their courses, okay? They are more responsible for both the personal and the social aspects of their course. So we're not just responsible for content. And again, this is stuff that happens naturally in a traditional classroom, but in an online classroom, what they're arguing is that as instructors, we have to be sort of hyper aware of it and build it into our process, okay? So our efforts need to be active rather than passive. So we are going to have a new definition of office hours. Go ahead and hit it. Office hours now, this is how we're going to think of it from here on out, okay? Office hours are a scheduled gathering. That means not I'm going to be in my office from 2 to 3, or I'm going to be in Adobe Connect, or you can stop by any time between this time. It means office hours start at 2 o'clock. I would love for you to be there at 2 o'clock. I'm going to be giving a presentation or whatever it is at 2 o'clock. All right, can you hit it? With a prepared message, that's the next part, because that's something that we don't usually associate with office hours, right? Usually it's just sort of come and ask questions and I respond. Instead, if we're taking an active approach to office hours instead of passive, we have a prepared message for our students. Now that might mean that we invite our whole class to come and we've got a little mini lesson, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. It might mean that we invite a small group of students who are struggling with a particular principle to come and we talk to them. It might mean that there's a group project going on and we invite a group to come and talk to us about it. It might mean that we invite an individual student to come and talk through an assignment or a draft. But in any case, what we have to say is planned and prepared, okay? So a scheduled gathering with a prepared message, delivered with your voice and your face. Who uses the webcam on Adobe Connect? Like 2 of you, 3, okay. So I know that in like leadership meetings, we really like to use those little pictures that come with our profile, and we flash that up on the screen and we just use the audio because it's easier, and I'm probably in my pajamas, don't have makeup on anyway when I'm at that meeting, and you know what I mean?
Mine freeze and my students go, wow, well, at least that's a good look. You mean I'm frozen? No, I don't look that good. I'm not frozen. Yeah, it was kind of funny.
Yeah, it is. And I live on a little island in the middle of Puget Sound, and I have like 0 decent internet reception. So I do this, but you've been in on my meetings. It's a little glitchy, but it's important that they not only hear our voice where they can catch inflection, right? They can hear a little bit of our personality, the way we speak, our rhythms, our idioms, things like that, but also that they get to see our face, make use of that webcam. They need to be able to see the nonverbal cues that we're giving them. It's fantastic if you can get them to use their webcam as well. That works better, obviously, when it's 1 student or just a couple of students, and sometimes the tech is really obnoxious, but it's important. The scholars talk about presence and immediacy, and those are 2 things that tell me they need to see my face, here and then here.
So if you're using a PowerPoint, do you think you also need to do webcam? It seems like it's sort of distracting.
We'll talk about that too. We'll talk about multitasking. I actually don't use a whole lot of PowerPoints in my office hours, but that's a personal preference. And sometimes I'll use the webcam for part of the meeting, and then I'll turn it off for a different part. But I feel strongly that giving students the opportunity to see your face is just hugely important. And a lot of times, truthfully, that means that like at 6 o'clock on Tuesday night after dinner, but before I put my kids to bed, I'm in the bathroom putting on makeup. And it's obnoxious, but it's funny, yeah.
We experimented with Google Hangouts in one of our meetings, and
Yeah.
How many students could you physically have on Google Hangouts and have it work?
I am not an expert on Google Hangouts. Is anybody else able to answer that? Yeah.
Webcam, I believe it's 10.
10?
Okay, thanks.
Okay. I know, see, I say that, and then I say, ooh, it'd be cool to be able to see your students too. And I know it gets unwieldy when you're dealing with a lot of people. I don't actually typically, in my experience, I invite all my students to come to my office hours, and I don't usually have them engage their webcams. It's usually just me until afterwards. If people want to stick around afterwards, then I say, go ahead and turn on your mic and your webcam. I'll change your status, and you can. And again, we'll talk about all this stuff. But the other thing that I need to know right now is I'm talking primarily about Adobe Connect, mostly because it's the one that I know best. I know that there are other formats. Google Hangouts is one. Skype is another. There are other ways to do it, and maybe other ways that make it easier to see the rest of our students. So if you have any knowledge about that, I would love to hear it. But for my experience here, it's mostly Adobe Connect. Were you going to say something else there?
No.
Okay. Okay. Like an option.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. All right. Okay, so this is going to be now the definition that we're working with: a scheduled gathering, a prepared message delivered with your face and voice. Okay. All right. What I wanted to do from here, and I forgot to set it up beforehand. Go ahead and click. I think I've got a blank screen next. I wanted to pull up Adobe Connect. Would that be helpful to see while we talk? Yes, I'm seeing yeses. Okay, so let me see what I can do to pull it up really quickly. And I'm so sorry to do this in the middle of what we're doing. Yeah.
I'm really liking this idea of changing what we call it,
Ah, why?
because I think it will make them think of it differently too. Class parties, what?
Right?
We're gathering or what are
In my
you
class, I call it our virtual classroom. And I don't call it an office hour. I say we'll have our virtual classroom on Tuesday at 10.
I like that too.
Instead of office hours. So they come knowing that we're going to have a discussion about class instead of
I like that.
that's what we call it.
X.
I like that.
We call ours instructor Q&A. They come in, ask questions, we ask questions.
For some reason, you guys, I can't get to my Adobe Connect like cold. I have to go, hit a link to do it, and I can't. For some reason, it won't open up where I need to be, and I'm really sorry about that.
Stacey?
Yes.
While you're pulling that up, I just wanted to, I work over in curriculum development. I just wanted to throw out, and I want this to come across correctly.
Okay.
I don't want to take away from anything you said.
No, you can tell me I'm wrong.
No, technically
I have kids.
technically speaking, we're not supposed to have any synchronous meeting with the students, like only one, you have to come to this, it has to be mandatory, you have to show up for this every week.
Yes, I'm really glad you brought that up. I was going to mention this.
Yeah. So anyway, but we can do really close. If we're willing to do it like, say, 3 times a week or that kind of thing, and you give them a choice of when they show up, ideally it's better to do it at different times so that it's not always at 9 o'clock at night. You do a couple at 9 o'clock at night, and then maybe once 2 o'clock in the afternoon for somebody who lives in England or, that kind of stuff. So anyway, you'll want to be just a little bit sensitive about that, is all that.
The way that the first couple semesters I did it, I offered 2 different times because I knew that. And truthfully, one of the times nobody ever showed. So that was, me scheduling. The way that I get around this, I wouldn't say it that way, but I don't ever say anywhere that it's required. I don't say that it's mandatory. But the other thing I don't do is say it's just optional. Don't worry about it. I talk about it as though it was something, and this is where we should probably jump into nuts and bolts because it looks like we're wanting to go that way. I talk about it as something that will improve their grade. It absolutely will help you. You will get a better essay score, for example. I teach English. Or this will help you understand this particular principle. I really encourage you to come. So I never say you're required to be there, your grade will suffer, but I also never say, if you can make it, or come to these optional office hours. Yeah.
One way we've gotten around the hours problem is we record it.
Yes.
And then we also give them bonus points. They have a little quiz that they give them a bonus word. So we meet in the group. We have 4 instructors in our group.
Right.
We take turns. Anyway, and our attendance has increased dramatically since we started doing bonus points.
Now in Pathway, we're not allowed to get bonus points, am I right? Yeah, we can't give extra credit. So be sure that you're checking with the supervisor to make sure that you can do that.
And when we give you bonus points, we're talking 2 points.
But some of my students would fight for those 2 points, yeah.
And what I found that's worked, I actually changed my hours from week to week, and I do it 3 times a week, different times, because I have a lot of international students. So I do different times, and I schedule it around myself, because I'm like this week, I can't do Tuesday night, but I can do this night.
Okay.
So I change my hours every week and post it, and it's actually, I have increased my students coming
Oh, that's
more than
interesting.
any other semester
Oh,
by
that's
changing it,
interesting.
so they have more options.
I guess my default has always been, I don't want to confuse them, so I just keep it the same time every week, and that helps. I've got little ones at home, so I have to kind of keep a schedule, but that's a good idea to kind of blow it up. Let me just really quickly, this is good, and I want to hear your ideas here, but I do want to structure this discussion a little bit. I want to talk about, we've got about 25 minutes here. I want to talk about what we can do before we hold these office hours, what we can do during to help our students, and then things that we can do afterwards, okay? Remembering that what we're going for here is the sense of community and motivation. Those are the 2 big things that we want to do for our students. So before we start office hours, before we even jump in there, what are some things that you have done or that it occurs to you it would be smart to do to prepare? Yes.
I actually have my students send in questions or topics that they would like to discuss.
Good.
So they send me that before we have.
That is excellent. That's something that I've done in teaching group meetings, but it's not actually something that I've done in office hours, but that's a great idea. So invite students to help determine the content of those meetings. Very good, Sarah.
I always define my objective. Well, why am I doing this? So it feels worth my time, and what are the students going to get out of it?
Good, good. Define your objective. Because what's not useful is the open house idea, right? Just showing up and saying, oh, maybe I'll talk to you about comments this week or something, right? Yeah, Melissa.
We will typically go through and present a little mini lecture,
Mm-hmm.
and most of that content is taken from the most commonly missed questions
Thank
on
you.
quizzes or tests, the most difficult concepts that
Yes.
we're going to have to understand.
Because what we can't do is introduce something new and then hold them responsible for that, right? We can't add to the curriculum without going through the course management, okay? So what's not helpful is to say you have to come and I'm going to teach you something fantastic and new and it'll help you, and you have to be there and you get points. What we can do, and especially once you've been teaching the same course for a while, is to figure out common mistakes, common problems, things that are covered in the course, but that students still trip up on. So my example is I teach English. It's comma splices. We spent what, 3 weeks on commas? We spent 3 weeks on commas, and I still, all the way till their final essay, have problems with comma splices. So I hold an office hour session, and when I do it, these little mini lessons that I do, they're 15 minutes long max, okay? So I hold a little mini lesson on comma splices. It's part of the curriculum, but it's something extra that I can tell that they need help with, okay? Very good, Melissa, thank you. Yeah?
This is just something I've been experimenting with lately.
Okay.
And the reason I came to this because I love this idea. I've been trying to use it as a place where they can teach one another. So rather than jump in and start critiquing I teach art class.
Okay.
So rather than jump in and start critiquing their work,
Uh-huh.
I'll give them a chance to say, okay, you guys tell me first what you see, they're doing right, what's maybe not as effective.
Good, so one of the things that we could do in preparation for office hours is maybe give them sort of an informal assignment, right? Switch assignments with somebody else, or come prepared to ask questions about, so involve your students even beforehand, help them prepare for office hours. That's great, yeah.
It seemed like several years ago, we had a revision course 212 that was a synchronous small group where everyone took a role, and then that role changed each week. One was the moderator, one was
You can, in groups, if you're divided into groups, you can do synchronous activities. You just can't do a synchronous activity for the entire class.
Mm-hmm. And that actually sounds a lot like something that they do at their gathering, at least for pathway students, right? That there's a lead student every week and they change that role every week. Yeah.
Couldn't we do that in an office? I mean, couldn't we have students lead? Because they've got to learn the material, and if I'm blowing it at them, they're not going to learn it the same as if they're by figuring out and presenting it. So could we? Is it wrong to let them present?
No, not at all.
No. I mean, it would have to be voluntary, right? We couldn't say, everybody has to sign up for one. And
could we, if we ran it through the course lead and got permission to add that to the class, to the curriculum? What's the rules on that?
Yeah, so Kimber, you might be able to help better on this than me.
Kimball's asleep.
You can have, groups can have synchronous activities, the entire class is supposed to have a synchronous activity. That's basically the guideline. So as far as what they do in that synchronous activity,
So if they volunteer to sign up to do a presentation, that's
Sure.
cool, okay.
So that's the group not really self-made.
no, you can assign groups. But usually if you're gonna have synchronous activities, the group, yeah, they're kind of self-sign up for times that work for them.
But pulling back, that's kind of a larger idea, is actually a fantastic idea, but kind of the smaller application here is, as far as I know, we can absolutely invite students to prepare a mini lesson and come present, right? So, for example, if you've got a student who's struggling with a particular principle, assign that student or invite that student to research and present a little bit. You know, not, this is the principle of learning more when you have to teach it to somebody else, right? Okay, good.
For what's worth, when I do my deal, I just post a Google Doc and I say, just post your artwork on this Google Doc.
Excellent.
And then we just pull that up.
Yeah, which is great. And we've got so many, well, in fact, that was kind of the first bullet point on my list, is learn the tech and use all of your resources. So like I said, I work in Adobe Connect, but we also have a lot of other ways to share information, to share assignments and things like that. But you have to know what you're dealing with. What I really wanted to be able to do was to pull up my Adobe Connect here and show you, have you used polls? Have you used different layouts that you can change around in the course of your meeting? Have you used music or videos? Have you used individual chats besides just the big chats, file share, whiteboard, you know, things like that? Have you explored everything that there is to know just in this one format that we have in Adobe Connect? Not to mention Google Hangouts or any of the other ones that you want to use. So spend some time getting to know the technology so that it can move smoothly. I love, again, that quotation from President Eyring, where he says we could use this technology to help them, you know, do it by themselves, but instead let's use the technology to figure out how to have them help each other. There's a lot of resources. Yeah.
You know, are there any trainings available for Adobe Connect?
Are there training drills for Adobe Connect? Yes! Tons and tons.
201.
Yes.
201.
OL 201, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
They have a whole module on it.
Yep. Plus, am I right, if you just go to the community, isn't there a whole, like,
It's also.
in the tutorials,
Oh, yeah,
video
there's
tutorials? Yep, which is why I wasn't too panicked about not having Adobe Connect up here, because I know that I can send you there and you can learn anything you want to know on.
That's how we all learn.
It's how we all learned it.
And then if that's not enough, ask your TGL, and if they don't know, they'll ask their ED.
Mhm.
And then
And have the age limit there.
But it's true, I just attended a breakout session about the online community, and there is such a wealth of resources there. You could spend your whole, you know, however many hours a day working, sifting through that and not get to all of it. So that is where you would find what you're talking about. You had another comment back there.
I was just gonna mention on the synchronous thing, keep this in mind, that we found out through the grapevine that we had a student over in Ghana, and he happened to be in a bishopric. So he would go to the church house to get his internet. He didn't have internet.
You didn't have internet.
Problem was, he had a synchronous activity that he had to attend, and because he was in Ghana and everybody else was in the US,
Sure.
his happened to be at 2 a.m. in the morning.
Oh.
So, and it took him 3 hours to
drive.
no, actually, he had to walk because the buses don't run so far. So it would take him 3 hours to walk, he'd be there for his hour meeting, and it'd take him 3 hours to walk back home. Obviously, it's used up most of the night.
Yeah.
Fortunately, he was in the bishopric, so he had a key to the church.
And you had nothing better to do.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Anyway, so that's just, I just throw that out,
Yeah.
so that as we're planning these kinds of things,
Right.
keep that kind of situation.
Yep, and I appreciate that, because I've had students all over the country, which is why when you're learning the tech, also learn how to record and archive those meetings, because that's not always intuitive, and set yourself some sort of alarm or a sticky note or something to remember to record the meetings, because that's my favorite trick, is not recording a meeting that I plan to record. Okay, let me just mention a couple here. We talked about picking a topic, right? Not new material necessarily, but we can tailor what we're emphasizing to the needs of our particular group of students. Prepare and practice because things like this happen where you think that you're gonna get to show something and then it doesn't work. So upload everything you need to
have the
before.
student in the classroom, but I'll fix that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Or in my case, my husband, like nearby always, so like, what do I do? What do I do? So run through everything before you try. Make sure your slides work. Make sure you've got an outline, things like that. Here's another thing I was going to mention. Somebody mentioned PowerPoint, which is great. PowerPoint is, we use it all the time. We don't have to go crazy with PowerPoint. We don't have to make a new PowerPoint for every single office hours mini lesson that we hold. Sometimes just a graphic is enough. Sometimes, a really well prepared set of questions with either a picture or not. Sometimes that's enough. They don't. What's more important is that they feel like they're part of this group, right? That we talked about. They see your face, they hear your voice. It's not so important that you have these beautifully prepared slides and that they get all of this information, okay? That's completely secondary, if not tertiary. Be there early. You guys ever logged on to a meeting and like nobody's there, or someone's there but nothing's happening, and it's awkward even though we can't see each other necessarily? It's still awkward because you don't know if you're allowed to chat or if you're early or if it's the right day or anything like that. Be there early. Have some music playing or a video or something. Set the stage. Have an icebreaker question. Make sure that we're thinking of this time as we would the time before or after class, that there's mingling going on, that there are opportunities for mingling going on, okay? The other thing that I would highly recommend is advertise. Somebody asked me before we started here, any tips for getting students to come to this? No, the answer is no. I don't know how to get students to come. But what I do is that I advertise my office hours like crazy. I give it to them in the announcements that I send out on Monday. I send them a reminder the day of. I send them the link the day after. Like, they hear about office hours from me at least 3 times a week. I hold it every week and they hear about it at least 3 times a week, okay? Any other ideas for things that we can do before? Yeah.
What I do if I'm wanting to have a really active office hour is at the beginning of the semester, I hold an open house where I'll do it like on 3 days that week at 3 different times, and I'll tell them, if at all possible, please sign up for a time. And I'm surprised, I'll usually get 2/3 to 3/4 of the class showing up on one of the rotations at some point. And then because they know how it works, they've been there, it's really just to get in there. I'll have polls for them to fill out.
Because part of, I think, what keeps them away is that second cat, remember, drops class, like invited office hours and they drop class. They just don't know.
They're scared.
They're scared, yeah. They don't know what it looks like, how to get there, if they have to sign in, if they have to make an appointment. So just,
this is the safe space. That's the whole objective.
Kind of breaking down that first barrier. So I really like the idea of it. I do a tour. I don't call it an office, open house. I call it a tour. Come take a tour of my virtual office. And I invite them at a specific time, and I show them all the features. I show them how to raise their hand or to applaud or to give a thumbs up or whatever, how to use the chat function, how to use all those things. In fact, I think I had that down as under the during office hours section, that during office hours, not only do we have to understand the tech, but we have to educate the students. We have to let them know how to navigate this space so that they feel comfortable in it, right? Any other ideas, thoughts, things that we can do to prepare? Yes?
Just a question, if you record your office hours and then publish them, does that decrease attendance because people figure they don't need to come because they'll just download it when it's convenient for them and they won't come to the office?
Anybody have an answer to that?
I found that no. I think most who are going to take the time to watch it would rather be there in person if they could.
That's exactly what I found.
Okay.
Yep.
The one semester that I was doing that, I found that it was actually downloaded most by people who had actually been there to review.
Oh, interesting. Almost every semester that I did it, I had a student say, I'm a young women's leader, I have to be at Mutual at the same time you're holding office hours, I can't be there. Every week I'm not going to be able to be there. So either I would hold 2 or I would record it and send it around and she would watch it faithfully. So just as they said here, I think the students who are motivated to participate are going to participate. Yep. Yeah.
We offer some small extra credit. And so people are sometimes freaked out that they're not going to get the extra credit in a scenario like that.
Again, if you're allowed to do that, that's a great incentive. If you're a halfway student, plug your ears. Don't even look.
What we do is we just let them email me, and then I'll bring up the PDF during the office hour and run through it as if they were there.
Oh, okay.
Watch it and get the extra credit.
Wow, very good, very good. Okay, things that we can do during. We talked about educating the students. kind of giving an open house or a tour. Be tuned in to the students. So this is tricky because at least in Adobe Connect, we've got a lot of different ways to interact, right? They could chat, they could set one of their little icons, they could, sometimes I open it up and let them, make them not host but presenter so they can type in notes or on a whiteboard and things like that. So it really requires, I know multitasking is kind of a bad word right now in organization experience. I know, but it does require us to be able to keep track of multiple streams of discourse going on at the same time. Is that hard for anybody besides me? One of you. It's hard for one of you. Come on.
The reason that it's impossible for the rest of us.
It's tricky, and to be totally honest, I'm better at it now after 4 semesters as a TGL than I was when I started doing it as an instructor. It's something that I think comes with practice, when you say so, Sarah. You get used to kind of keeping an eye on one thing or another. I really like what Melissa does, and I don't know how we would ever do that, but they have multiple instructors online at the same time, so one of them is in charge of monitoring the chat. One of them is giving a presentation. One of them is doing something else. So if you have the opportunity, wouldn't that be awesome to pair up with another instructor and do that? I think that's fantastic. Otherwise, hone those multitasking skills and be able to focus on your students in different ways. Yes?
Going along with that, then when there's that random issue that comes up, one of us can pull out and Google and figure out the answer and then bring it back in.
Yes.
And and everybody's happy.
Because what I end up doing, I keep a notepad next to me, and a student will ask a question. I do this in my meetings all the time. They'll ask a question, I'll say, I don't know the answer to that, I'm writing it down. I'm writing it down right now. And then I go after the meeting's over and I look it up and send it around. So yeah, awesome idea.
What they're doing is an interesting thing to consider, I think, even for teaching groups. There's a lot of people that teach similar subjects. And if you guys are wanting to do this, but you're worried that you might not be able to do it, I mean, I'm motivated. Like, to sit here and think, is there another English 106 instructor that would be willing to host office hours at the same time as me? And you could use her office, my office, and hold it together.
And we found real synergy, like having 20 students there is way more exciting than 5.
Yeah. Yep.
That's really neat.
It is neat. It's a great idea. It's something that I hope that we get to do a little bit more of. Just a couple other principles, because these are things that come from people who are smarter than me. Prompt interaction every 3 to 5 minutes. If your students go 5 minutes without having to answer a question or raise their hand or do something like that, they will tune out, right? 5 minutes, tops. I try and keep my office hours to 15 minutes, so I know that I have to ask at least 2 questions. But I do a lot of sort of social chatting at the beginning anyway. Be aware of learning styles. We have the opportunity to provide kind of multiple access points for students. Some may process information better if they see it. Some respond really well to a video. Some are good when they hear it. Some really need to see text spelled out in bullet points and things like that. And something like Adobe Connect gives us the opportunity to do work kind of on multiple levels there. So be sure that you're giving them the opportunity to access this information in multiple ways. Keep it short. Like I said, 15 minutes is kind of my magic number. That doesn't come from anything besides, that's what I've been doing. But inevitably, I end up staying online for almost my full office hour because I'll have my presentation. I'll, chat with them for 5 minutes at the beginning, have my presentation that goes another 15 minutes, and then people stick around and want to ask questions. So if the information that we give is short, then they'll have more time to stay and talk.
Do you tell your students it's going to be 15
Yep.
minutes? I think that probably.
Yep, I do. When I advertise, I tell, in fact, thanks, because you reminded me of something else that I do beforehand and forgot to mention. I tell them that it's going to be 15 minutes. I tell them exactly what time I'm going to start. I tell them it's going to be short. Just tune in for 15 minutes and stick around if you want to ask questions. I also have a catchy title. I tell them the topic of every single office hours. I don't just say, come, it's going to be helpful. I say, we're going to be talking about citing sources. You want to come and learn how to cite sources. So I give them a heads up on what we will be talking about. Thanks for mentioning that, Jennifer. I appreciate it. And then we've already talked about recording it and making that recording available. Anything else you guys can think of for during the office hours to make it more effective?
I just have a quick question. Obviously, well, I assume others have had the same situation where I, got onto Adobe Connect and waited for people to show up. And, obviously what you're talking about is a lot more dynamic, so I'm expecting that wouldn't happen nearly as often. But if that does happen, do you basically say, if I haven't seen anybody by 12:15, then
I've done it 2 different ways. and you'll be able to tell which was like my enthusiastic early, teacher one, and which is probably what I do now. Early on, I would actually give my presentation anyway and record it and make it available to them. I did that a couple of times. I never heard, I don't know if they appreciated that or not. What I've been doing now, such like the mean mom of me, I will email them the next, or when I would normally send out the recording, what I do is say, well, nobody showed up for office hours, so we didn't hold it this week. Hope to see you next week. Motivated them to show up, because I'm not going to send around a recording.
Couldn't you be more direct and say, I'm sorry you couldn't make it?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. Or send around a recording of me going, why? I don't do that stuff. I don't. Any other ideas and things we can do in the course of our office hours? Yeah.
There is one thing that I learned, and you may already know this, but in Adobe Connect, there's a doorbell.
Yes. Who uses the doorbell? Yes, the doorbell feature. That's more helpful, I found, when I'm doing sort of the open house kind of thing. Like, what I've done is to tell students, I will be giving a mini lesson from this time to this time. I will be in my office until this time. So after I'm done and everybody leaves, sometimes I'll leave it open with a little doorbell on so that anyone can show up who couldn't make it earlier. Yeah, the doorbell is a helpful function. Yes.
Well, this may not be that important, but yesterday, we did some teaching group leader activities where we were like really interactive team building, like we did the ropes course.
Yes.
So fun. Are there any fun virtual team building activities we can do with our students, and what are everyone's ideas? Because I love it.
I'm sorry, we've got 2 minutes left of class, and I wish we could have that conversation. I would love to. In fact, yeah, let's have, will you post that in the community? Because I would love to participate in that. I'm going to second something that I heard in the session before. I use Pinterest like crazy. And so if I find like online icebreakers or online getting to know you games, things like that, I'll post it in my little English 106, or pin it, sorry, to my board. But that's something that I've been looking into a lot, ways to help students sort of open up and have those activities. Let me mention just a couple more things really quickly. After the office hours session, we already talked about recording it, sending around a recording. I find it really important, as much as I sort of front load it and talk about it ahead of time, to talk about it after the fact. I try and dovetail with the asynchronous elements of my course, okay? So I'll mention it in the class announcements or in my notes from the instructor. Sometimes I'll send along links to a recording in assignment feedback, like something that I've been having trouble with, and I say, hey, we talked about this in this office hours, here's the link, and watch it. So make sure on both ends that you're calling attention to what you're doing. Also be sure that you follow up on assignments. If students ask questions that you didn't have a response to, or if they gave requests for topics, we talked about this, that you follow up on things that your students particularly requested, okay? I'm so sorry, you guys, I should have gauged this a little bit better. I knew that you had more to contribute. But I want to read you just a handful of things that students have said about office hours, not mine, other people's. I love that she has this set office hour each week where we can log in and receive a short mini lesson that helps us with our assignment. She also provides questions and answer discussion times as well. I love that she has office hours where we can meet with her and get more detailed instruction. Sister X is over the top when it comes to helping people as a class or individually. She spends time teaching us during her office hours. This one is my favorite. I loved the class meeting every Tuesday night. It helped so much. I wish every course would do it. Okay, sorry, I got more. I could read more and more of these. The students are responding to these. It's not just theoretical. The experts, tell us what they tell us. But when it comes down to it, it's the student's experience that really makes the difference. I think I've got one more slide. Oh, I've got some review slides. We don't have to go over those. Skip through them. Sorry.
No problem. I love
Practicing that space bar.
it's
Gonna go away. Darn it. Can you scroll down, because there's one quotation that I wanted to read. Is it gonna let you do it? Just hit refresh. It's a quotation, I believe, from President Eyring that I found. You're amazing, Sarah. Thank you.
No problem.
Should be just the very last slide.
Sorry, I'm used to it.
It's okay. I know.
Oh, my goodness.
I'm used to a trackpad, so I have trouble with that.
Here?
Okay, this is something. Oh, it's Elder Bednar, back when he was President Bednar, right? New technologies. Think of office hours when you hear these things, okay? New technologies, innovative pedagogies, more sophisticated students are challenging us to rethink and reevaluate many of our most fundamental assumptions about the process of learning and teaching. I had some pretty fundamental assumptions about office hours, right? And I'm rethinking that. We have an ever-increasing responsibility to use the resources of this great campus to assist in the building of the kingdom of God in all the world. Again, just to sort of echo what President Gilbert said, this is not exclusively about me communicating how to avoid common slices to my students. That our efforts here need to be centered on building the kingdom of God, and we've got all kinds of different resources and ways that we can reach out to students to help them feel like they're not in this alone, that they're part of the community, and to help motivate them to participate and really take ownership of their learning. I'm excited about this, I'm hopeful about this, and I feel like my little effort at office hours, right, meeting with students for 15 minutes a week is part of a fulfillment of what the founders and the presidents of the university and the influential people who have been talking about this are talking about, that this is my little contribution to building the kingdom and building up my students. Thank you so much for coming. Sorry we're over time.